John chuckled as he said, "I'm divorcing a wife who doesn't work, so paying me $1,000 a month as alimony sounds good. Take care." Emily was standing next to him, wearing a similar smug expression, and I said it so casually that John seemed a little surprised, but he quickly shared his thoughts. John had just thrust a divorce lawyer's business card at me after we hadn't seen each other for a month. I decided to start my revenge plan on both of them after the divorce papers were approved. I will make them cry as a celebration of my recovery. My name is Sarah Wolf, and I'm 47 years old. I also work as a children's book author, and I just love drawing. I have two childhood friends, Jan and Emily, who are important to me, and Jan is also my husband. I smile with Emily. Fortunately, Jan doesn't think much, so it makes my plan easier to carry out. Began when John asked me out while I was on my way to another college after high school. I was shocked because I thought he was into Emily, but I couldn't say no to a confession from John, whom I had secretly liked. After some consideration and discussion with Emily, I accepted John's proposal. Emily's behavior had been a little problematic since she was a teenager, but she was still a close friend of both John and me, but she had a habit of stealing other people's boyfriends and then cheating on them. John and I got married when we were 25 years old, and 4 years later, Emily brought her fiancé, George, into our lives. He works as a professional for a prestigious company, and it's nice to meet you, Sarah and John. I've heard so much about you two, and I'm looking forward to our future together. Their obsession with her caused problems repeatedly, so John and I frequently spent time with her to watch over her. John and I decided we didn't need children because we both loved children but weren't interested in actively caring for them. We would get together during holidays and vacations, go on trips, or take long train rides to enjoy some drinks, but after Emily became pregnant, things started to fall apart. John and I had many siblings when we first got married, so there was no worry about hair, and we loved our freedom to travel and enjoy drinks we frequently found. When Emily revealed that she was pregnant, John's attitude changed. He quit smoking because Emily said she couldn't stand the smell, and he even offered to drive her to doctor's appointments using his vacation days. I told him that George might become upset if you were constantly with Emily. But John countered that you have work, don't you? Emily is our childhood friend, and she's reaching out to you. John scowled at me when I said, I've been buying things and helping where I can, but going with her to the obstetrician is crossing the line. Emily wants it right, and she says she's nervous about the checkup. If she's nervous, I can't just let her go alone. So if you go with her every time, it's almost like you're the one who's doing it. John, the father of the unborn child, was jealous and said, You're not going to get pregnant anyway, so what's the problem? Instead of taking my worries seriously, he became irate and began to say that I was being bothersome. During our marriage, we had rarely argued, but when Emily became pregnant, our arguments escalated. This continued even after Emily gave birth, as Janan began spending even more time with Emily and her child, Emma. An incident involving Emma's graduation attendees occurred when John started searching through the closet the day before the ceremony. John said, What are you doing? Because he had a meeting tomorrow. John's workplace had a casual dress code, but he always had a few suits on hand because it was required to wear a suit to client meetings. Now, he's just trying to decide what to wear to the graduation ceremony. Regardless of how you look at it, I unintentionally raised my voice in denial when John's face turned sour. I knew he occasionally picked Emma up from kindergarten, and I had done the same when asked, but it was absurd for a childhood friend who wasn't even a biological parent to attend a graduation. What are you really thinking about? George can't make it. Emily asked me to wait. Ceremony, why do you still doubt me and Emily? I'm disappointed that you can't even assist, but that's not the point. Anyhow, I'm going to the graduation tomorrow, so I'm going to iron a shirt properly. John said that and then abruptly ended the conversation, leaving me in the bedroom. I had no choice but to call Emily and say, Hello, Emily, about tomorrow. I'm sorry about tomorrow, but won't George be upset about the fact that I'm borrowing John? Sarah, what are you talking about? Obviously, I haven't told George that the graduation is tomorrow. I'll let him know after the ceremony. I was surprised to find out that George was unaware of the graduation schedule, and after asking more questions, it appeared that Emily hadn't told him about any of the kindergarten events up to this point, and John had been acting as the kindergarten's father, which made me feel nauseous with its self-centeredness. Hold on, Emily. It's disrespectful to George, isn't it? What's wrong, Sarah? You're scary. I'll see you tomorrow, Emily. I was shaking with rage when Emily abruptly hung up the phone. But I still ironed a shirt, made a tie, and the following morning, I saw John off to Emma's graduation ceremony. Ever since, Emily and John have gone out more frequently, going from once a month to once a week and then to 3 times a week. After a week, even George appeared to have some suspicions, and one day when John and Emily were out, he came to our house by himself. I apologize for coming to see you so late, but something has been bothering me. Is it related to the two of them? Yes, I would like you to look at this. George showed me the GPS history he had put in Emily's car, which revealed that she had been staying at a hotel 3 times a week during the days she was out with Jan and just by. After seeing George's face, I realized what he was saying. What do you want to do, George? I want to get even with those two. I can't forgive them for betraying us. We began plotting our retaliation in secret. First, I increased my income because I had been saving money by taking care of Emma and doing housework. George then switched to working from home, and when Emily and John went out, he would bring Emma to my home, and we would look after her together. Neither Emily nor John realized that we were aware of the relationship, and we were able to obtain reliable evidence. When we were prepared to exact our revenge, we learned a startling truth about Emma. George and I debated the choice, but ultimately decided that we didn't want to harm young Emma, so we waited until she was an adult before doing so. Though I could work from the hospital room, it was inevitable that I would have to cut back on my workload after telling George about the situation. I spoke with John about it, but his response was the same as when we were chit-chatting. So even though we agreed to endure for 10 years, I was struck with a serious illness that required long-term hospitalization, and even at best I wouldn't be discharged for at least 2 years. Although Emma used to visit me almost daily immediately after I was hospitalized, she started acting strangely after her 15th birthday. George and I couldn't figure out why, and we were perplexed even when we asked Emma why. But I felt that Jan no longer cared for me because he didn't even inquire about my condition or the name of the disease. After all, Jan only came once a month or once every 2 months. Just said don't worry about it, but we found out why from Jen, who didn't show up very often. Hey, it's been a while. Jen, who had completely changed into a flashy appearance, came in without knocking after I hadn't seen him in a month. John just threw a divorce lawyer's business card at me without even asking how I was feeling or if I was okay. The deal is that I get paid $1,000 a month as alimony for divorcing a wife who doesn't work, so take care. It was good that Jan wasn't the type to think too deeply, which is why my plan worked so well. After receiving notification from John that the divorce was finalized, I decided to begin my revenge plan against the two of them. John said, smiling from ear to ear, "Fine, let's divorce." Emily wrapped her arms around Janice with a similar expression on her face, and I casually agreed, which seemed to surprise Jay for a moment. But he quickly exchanged smiles with Emily. In celebration of my recovery, I will make them cry. I immediately got to work, first calling George to switch hospitals, then telling my lawyer that they would be mediating between the two parties going forward. George also started acting at the same time, moving close to my new hospital with Emma and starting to visit me frequently. Emma still had a dejected expression, but I was glad that she came to see me every day for the majority of my. After the hospital transfer and George and Emma's move were over, I told John to get rid of the remaining items because I didn't want to bring anything that the two of them might have touched into my new life. A few minutes after I had left my seat, I got a call from John, and my smartphone displayed 30 missed calls. I answered the phone in frustration, thinking, hey, what the hell is going on? Behind John's frantic voice, I could hear Emily screaming, which made me feel ill. What are you talking about? It's clearly about the house. So why do we have to move out? John yelled at me as though it wasn't his fault at all. I told him coolly, that's my house, huh? Jan seemed to have forgotten entirely, but the house we lived in was actually a room I rented as a workspace when I started Jamaica. Since John didn't have enough money to live alone and I was working as a freelancer at the time, he ended up moving in with me. As a result, Jan had never paid the rent or utility bills for that room, and even though I got some money from him for living expenses, it wasn't enough to keep the place up to date. Unfortunately, that room had already been canceled, and it was far from the hospital I transferred to, so I had processed the. As I turned on the speaker and got to work, Jan yelled in frustration, "Don't screw with me," but he seemed to remember something and began talking. I didn't tell him about the cancellation the day after I submitted the divorce papers because the real estate agent who was aware of the situation said they would get in touch with him. George and Emma abruptly vanished, and our house was sold. What are we going to do about our new house? I don't know. Maybe stay in a business hotel for the time being. In a more calm manner, well, when will you send the money? We're running low on cash. So what are you talking about? Oh, don't I be around? I told you to pay $11,000, didn't I? Oh, I don't remember agreeing to that. When I didn't respond, Jonathan, on the other end of the phone, screamed incoherently, indicating that he thought he could get money from me and had been wasting it. Even if he had $11,000 left, how did he intend to make ends meet for the remainder of the month? My retort left John momentarily stunned, but he soon began yelling again, growing more irritated. I addressed Jan in the most upbeat manner I could manage, but since we are now essentially strangers, please don't contact me anymore. You'll hear from my lawyer, hey, wait a minute. I hung up without listening to John's response. He tried calling back multiple times, but I ignored it. John had a childish side, but I never thought he'd be the type of person who didn't mind causing trouble for others. I sighed deeply at John's selfishness. A few months later, after a temporary discharge from the hospital, I went to John's parents' house, where Jen and Emily were both small and trembling. You tell him my parents are. I felt it was improper to keep the details of our divorce a secret, so I went to visit my in-laws. Is it true that you're remarrying Emily? Yes, it is true that Emily, Emma, and I are getting married. I just told them that we got divorced, and Jen glared at me in response to my response, but he retreated under his father's stern gaze. John's words caused his father to frown and give me a look that said, "Give me a break." He shook his head a few times and then handed me a piece of paper that was a bill from a nearby luxury hotel. Are you sure this is the bill from the hotel we stayed at? John pointed at the bill on the table as if it were obvious, then abruptly collapsed. Oh, what the heck, Mom? I didn't raise you to be. John looked at my mother-in-law as she gasped for air, and Emily wore the same expression. Why are you so angry? The family is changing because I'm getting married, and you'll have a blood-related grandchild. Aren't you both happy about that? My mother-in-law looked as though she couldn't believe what she was seeing, then she turned to face me. Both of my in-laws knew that I didn't want. There was always a boundary between a daughter-in-law and a friend, and I remembered Emily frequently complaining about that. I was sure my mother-in-law wouldn't be happy about this situation, and Emily should have known it too. You do want Emma, right? It'll be your grandchild, so you'll be happy, right? It's because she's a child I've known since the beginning. I got chills when someone who had been silent up until that point spoke up enough. It's disgustingly hot. Emma, who had been playing with her smartphone in the corner of the room, spoke to Emily without looking up, leaving the room in stunned silence. And even after all of this, Emily showed no remorse and pretended that she couldn't understand the problem. John is the only person I consider my father. Jan has always been the only one to attend your school events, whether or not we are related by blood. I've heard from Dad that he was always told the dates of the events after they were over and that eventually even the events themselves were kept from him. But Dad always said, I am his daughter, so I am his daughter and I will never be yours. Emma glared at Emily as she said this, and then she sat next to me and changed to Amor. When I learned about this, I thought he would be upset with me, but Dad assured me that wasn't the case, so I came here today, Emma. I love you so much, Emma. You were very kind to come see me every day while I was in the hospital, which made me very happy. Sarah, Emma, maybe relieved of her anxiety, started crying and hugging me. It may be a child from an affair between John and Emily, but I've been caring for this child for 15 years, so there's no way I don't have. Since she had recently unilaterally demanded a divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, I was shocked when you mentioned divorce. Oh, and you're not divorced yet. I was curious as to why I wasn't surprised when I learned that Emma is John's daughter. Emily looked shocked before she could speak. A new person entered the room, who we knew from the beginning 10 years ago. Actually, George appeared suddenly. Since there won't be a wife, I couldn't help but be shocked that Emily, despite the 100-day waiting period for women to remarry, had noticed for months that Emma is still my daughter and Emily is still my wife. But wait, what do you mean that a 15-year-old can choose their parent? Emily said that Emma wants to be with Mom. The divorce papers are still here. Didn't you notice? What? I assumed it wasn't in Emily's and John's nature to confirm things. Looked at Emma, Emma scowled at Emily, and Emily glared at me before John suddenly started laughing. So that's what it is, you two are together, huh? But too bad, isn't it impossible to live on George's salary alone? Can you stop making strange assumptions? It also seems like George makes twice as much as you think Emily knows about it, so it's probably a bluff. In addition, you can't work while you're ill. Just die miserably somewhere this time. I laughed at John's huge misunderstanding. Jan saw me start laughing and became frustrated because you didn't know about my income, did you? No, it's different. My annual income is $500,000. John's eyes and mouth were wide open in shock, and Emily was also taken aback. In fact, over the past 10 years, I have become a popular children's book. I said that and showed Emily my bank account screen, which clearly showed a large amount of money being deposited every month. Emily was at a loss for words when she saw it. Sarah, let's, make up. What are you saying? Emily was angry at John's words because she was blinded by the money. I watched them. Author and my income had skyrocketed from essays, interviews, and I'll like more. Also, a movie adaptation is coming up. After saying goodbye to my in-laws, I took Emma's hand and left their house. John had worked at my father-in-law's company before it was discovered that he was lying about going out for sales, so he was fired. My father-in-law then planned to force him to work on a friend's fishing boat. I said blankly, if you want to get married, feel free. Oh, and I'll definitely take the compensation for damages, Sarah. Wait, Sarah. It was difficult for an indoor-loving John to work on a fishing boat, and he kept calling me. However, each time I told my father-in-law, the calls eventually stopped, and Emily lost custody to George and got divorced. She didn't seem interested in John, who couldn't afford luxuries, and she didn't seem to pursue him. She was disowned by her family, lived alone in a dilapidated apartment, and hadn't worked since getting married. Emma worked hard every day to study abroad and attend a prestigious university overseas because she had always relied on others to do things for her. She was unable to do anything herself, and few employers would hire her as a full-time employee. She still had to pay for living expenses and child support, so she worked multiple part-time jobs and barely made ends meet after graduating from high school. Initially, Emma was assiduous, and her dream was to transition at my picture books and distribute them to kids worldwide, which brings me joy. As for me, my picture books are selling well, and I am getting more and more offers for merchandise that features anime adaptations. My illness is also getting better, and even though I am still in the hospital, my doctor recently suggested that I might be able to leave in the coming year. In addition, George and Emma visit me every day. In fact, George recently admitted. I haven't responded yet, but I can't help but feel something for him. He mentioned that he wants to live with me after I get out of the hospital, so I'm working on my picture books every day in the hopes that we will have a happy future together. I weave stories once more. Today,